Cari fratelli e sorelle,
Dear brothers and
oggi
sisters,
festeggiamo due fratelli
today
nella fede,
we celebrate two brothers in
Pietro e
faith,
Paolo,
Peter and
che
Paul,
riconosciamo come
whom we
pilastri della
honor as
Chiesa,
pillars of the church
veneriamo come
and
patroni
venerate
della
as
diocesi e
patrons
della
of the
città di
diocese
Roma.
and city of Rome.
La storia di questi due apostoli
The story of these two
interpella da
apostles
vicino anche
has
noi,
much to say to us
comunità dei discepoli
as
del
the
Signore
community of the
pellegrini in
Lord's
questo
disciples
nostro tempo.
as we make our pilgrim way in today's world.
Guardando alla loro
Upon reflection, I would like to emphasize
sottolineare
two
due aspetti:
specific aspects
la
of their
comunione
faith.
ecclesiale
Firstly,
e la
ecclesial
vitalità
communion,
della fede.
and secondly, the vitality of faith.
Anzitutto, la comunione ecclesiale.
Firstly, ecclesial communion.
La liturgia di questa solennità, infatti,
Today's liturgy
ci fa vedere
indeed
come Pietro
reminds
e
us
Paolo
how
sono
Peter
stati
and
chiamati
Paul were
a
called
vivere
to
un unico destino,
share a single
quello
fate,
del martirio,
single fate,
che li ha
that
associati
of martyrdom,
definitivamente a
which
Cristo.
united them
Nella
definitively
prima
to
lettura
Christ.
troviamo Pietro
In the first
che in
reading,
prigione
we see Peter
attende che
in
sia
prison,
eseguita la
awaiting
sentenza.
judgment.
Nella seconda,
In the second reading,
l'apostolo Paolo,
the Apostle Paul,
anche egli in catene,
also in
in
chains,
una sorta di
tells us
testamento afferma
in
che
a
il
kind
suo
of
sangue
last
sta
will
per
and
essere
testament
sparso e
that
offerto a Dio.
his blood is about to be poured
Sia
out
Pietro
and
che
offered to
Paolo
God.
donano
Peter
la
and
loro
Paul
vita
were both
per la
ready
causa del
to
Vangelo.
lay down their lives for the sake of the gospel.
Tuttavia questa comunione nell'unica
Yet this
confessione della
communion
fede
of the two
non è
apostles
una
in the
conquista
one
pacifica.
confession of faith
I due
was the
apostoli la
conclusion
raggiungono come un
of
traguardo a cui
a
approdano dopo un
long
lungo
journey
cammino nel quale
on
ciascuno
which
ha abbracciato la
each
fede
embraced the
e
faith
vissuto
and
l'apostolato
lived out
in modo diverso.
his apostolate in his own
La
particular
loro
way.
fraternità nello spirito
Their
non
brotherhood in
cancella
the
le
Spirit
diversità dalle
did
quali
not
sono
erase
partiti.
their different backgrounds.
Simone era un
Simon
pescatore di
was
Galilea.
a fisherman from Galilee,
Saulo invece
while
un
Saul
rigoroso intellettuale
was highly
appartenente al partito dei farisei.
educated and a member of the party of the
Il primo lascia
Pharisees.
subito tutto per seguire il
Peter
Signore.
immediately left everything
Il
to follow the
secondo
Lord,
perseguita i
while
cristiani
Paul
finché viene
persecuted Christians
trasformato da Cristo
before
risorto.
his life-changing encounter with the risen
Pietro
Christ.
predica soprattutto ai giudei.
Peter preached mainly
Paolo
to
è
the
spinto a
Jews,
portare la buona
while
notizia
Paul
alle
was
genti.
driven to bring the good news to the Gentiles.
Tra i due, come sappiamo,
As we know,
non
the
mancarono
two
conflitti
were
a proposito
at odds
del rapporto con i
over
pagani,
the proper way
al
to deal
punto
with
che
Gentile
Paolo
converts.
afferma,
So much so
quando Cefa
that Paul
venne
tells
ad
us,
Antiochia,
quote,
mi
"When
opposi a
Cephas
lui a
came to
viso
Antioch,
aperto,
I opposed him
perché
to his
aveva
face,
torto.
because he stood
E di tale
self-condemned."
questione, come
That's from
sappiamo,
Galatians.
si
At
occuperà
the
il
Council of
concilio di
Jerusalem,
Gerusalemme, nel quale i due
the two
apostoli si
apostles would
confronteranno
once
ancora.
more debate the issue.
Carissimi, la storia di Pietro e Paolo ci
Dear
insegna che
friends,
la
the
comunione
history
a
of
cui il
Peter and Paul
Signore ci
shows
chiama
us that
è un'armonia di
the
voci
communion to
e
which
di
the Lord
volti
calls us
e non
is a
cancella la
unison of
libertà di
voices and
ognuno.
personalities that does
I
not
nostri
eliminate anyone's
patroni
freedom.
hanno percorso sentieri diversi,
Our patron
hanno
saints
avuto idee
followed different
differenti,
paths, had
a
different
volte si
ideas,
sono confrontati
and
e
at times
scontrati
argued with one
con
another with
franchezza evangelica.
evangelical frankness.
Eppure ciò non ha impedito
But
loro
this
di vivere
did
la
not prevent them
concordia
from living
apostolorum,
the Concordia
cioè
Apostolorum,
una
that
viva
is,
comunione nello
a
Spirito,
living communion in
una
the Spirit,
feconda sintonia
a
nella
fruitful harmony
diversità.
in diversity.
Come afferma Sant'Agostino,
As St. Augustine
un
remarks,
solo giorno è consacrato alla
the feast
festa
of the
dei
two
due
apostles
apostoli,
is celebrated
ma
on
anch'essi
one day.
erano una cosa sola,
They too were
benché
one,
siano stati
for
martirizzati
although
in
they were
giorni
martyred on
diversi,
different days,
erano una
they
cosa
were one.
sola. Tutto questo ci interroga sul
All
cammino
of
della
this
comunione
invites us to
ecclesiale.
reflect on the nature of ecclesial
Essa
communion.
nasce dall'impulso dello Spirito,
Awakened by the inspiration of the
unisce le
Spirit,
diversità
it unites
e crea
differences and
ponti di unità
builds bridges
nella
of unity,
varietà dei carismi,
thanks to the
dei
rich
doni
variety
e dei
of
ministeri.
charisms, gifts, and
È
ministries.
importante imparare a vivere
It is
così la
important
comunione,
that we learn to experience
come
communion in
unità
this
nella
way,
diversità,
as unity within diversity, so that the various gifts, united in the one confession of faith, may advance the preaching of the gospel. We are called to persevere along this path, following the example of Peter and Paul, since all of us need that kind of fraternity. The whole church needs fraternity, which must be present in all of our relationships, whether between lay people and priests, priests and bishops, bishops and the Pope. Fraternity is also needed in pastoral care, ecumenical dialogue, and the friendly relations that the Church desires to maintain with the world. Let us make an effort then to turn our differences into a workshop of unity and communion, of fraternity and reconciliation, so that everyone in the Church, each with his or her personal history, may learn to walk side by side. Saints Peter and Paul also challenge us to think about the vitality of our faith. In our life as disciples, we can always risk falling into a rut, a routine, a tendency to follow the same old pastoral plans without experiencing interior renewal and a willingness to respond to new challenges. The two apostles, however, can inspire us by the example of their openness to change, to new events, encounters, and concrete situations in the life of their communities, and by their readiness also to consider new approaches to evangelization in response to the problems and difficulties raised by our brothers and sisters in the faith. At the heart of today's gospel lies the question that Jesus asked his disciples. Today he asks us that same question, challenging us to examine whether our faith life retains its energy and vitality, and whether the flame of our relationship with the Lord still burns bright. Who do you say that I am? Every day, at every moment in history, we must always take this question to heart. If we want to keep our identity as Christians from being reduced to a relic of the past, as Pope Francis often reminded us, it is important to move beyond a tired and stagnant faith. We need to ask ourselves, who is Jesus Christ for us today? What place does he occupy in our lives and in the life of the Church? How can we bear witness to this hope in our daily lives and proclaim it to those whom we meet? Brothers and sisters, the exercise of a discernment born from these questions can enable our faith and the faith of the Church to be constantly renewed and to find new paths and new approaches to preaching the gospel. This, together with communion, must be our greatest desire. Today, I would like to speak to the Church in Rome in particular, because it, above all, is called to be a sign of unity and communion, a church on fire with vibrant faith, a community of disciples who testify to the joy and consolation of the gospel wherever people find themselves. In the joy of the communion that the lives of Saints Peter and Paul invite us to cultivate, I greet my brother archbishops, who today receive the pallium. Dear brothers, this sign of the pastoral responsibility entrusted to you also expresses your communion with the Bishop of Rome, so that in the unity of the Catholic faith, each of you may build up that communion in your local churches.
Desidero poi salutare I membri del Sinodo della Chiesa Greco-Cattolica Ucraina.
I would also like to greet the members of the Synod of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. I thank you for your presence here and for your pastoral zeal. May the Lord grant peace to your people. And with deep gratitude, I greet the delegation of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, sent here by my dear brother, His Holiness Bartholomew. Dear brothers and sisters, strengthened by the witness of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, let us walk together in faith and communion and invoke their intercession upon ourselves, the city of Rome, the Church, and the whole world.